Welcome into the five-star sit-down alongside Devin Henry. I'm Jordan Ham, and this is a new show, kind of taking a new life from the Friday Night 360 AZ preview show. We obviously don't have much to preview now that the high school football season is over, but all eyes are shifting to recruiting with early signing day happening on the 19th and then a second one in February. So we wanted to shift our focus to the recruiting side of things, and we have two really good guests coming up on this episode. Brandon Huffman, national recruiting editor for 24/7 Sports. This guy lives and breathes this stuff. I think there's nobody better in the entire country to talk about recruiting in-state here in Arizona, with ASU, with U of A. We're going to cover a lot with him. And then Mike Nesbitt, the Ottawa head football coach. They just wrapped up their first season. We're going to talk to him about recruiting as an NAIA program and some of the changes within the landscape of Arizona and how that affects them. So two really good guests, but Devin, you made the jump from behind the glass to co-host. Welcome on, and excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, I've been pulled up to varsity, super excited. And of course, always with recruiting, it's really tough when you come up to this part of the year and you're going, who exactly is going where? So it's really fun to look all around the entire state and see what's going to happen.
And let's start with that. Let's start with kind of the landscape of this 2019 class within Arizona high school football. I think the kind of the heavy hitters this year within the state have been Arizona State and Cal. Cal's come in. Charlie Ragle, who former Chaparral head coach, just down the road from our studio in Scottsdale, former Arizona coach, has a ton of ties here. He's come in and nabbed some really good players for the Cal Bears, and a couple of them on the west side who I know you're very familiar with.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, you have Ryan Puskis and then Braxton Crota, who are two phenomenal defensive players. And it always seems like the defensive players are the guys that are typically in the shadows, especially with this class, because you talked about how to characterize this class. I mean, quarterback. A
lot of strong quarterbacks this year, yeah.
So a lot of defenders end up going into the shadows, but it's really funny how Cal wasn't necessarily that much of a powerhouse in the Pac-12 last year. They've gotten better now, and now all of a sudden there's a ton of Arizona guys heading over there.
And you have Justin Wilcox just signing an extension, a 5-year extension, so it seems like he's going to be sticking around for a while. And I got to talk to some of those guys, DeCarlos Brooks, the running back over at Chandler, Spencer Brash, the quarterback over at Higley, that are all committed over there as well, and they were just so excited for that. And the one thing that they talked about was the realness that Coach Ragle has, that when they asked for evaluations on themselves, Charlie Ragle wasn't afraid to say, you're screwing up in this department. And, I was talking to Spencer Brash and said, how rare is that for a coach that's recruiting you and obviously trying to, pump you up a little bit to go and be with their school? How often does that happen? And he goes, not really that often. So that authenticity, I think, is very appreciated by this group, and obviously trying to create a pipeline. A couple other notables here. The Red River Shootout is getting some Arizona characters here. Spencer Rattler, quarterback over at Pinnacle, is heading to Oklahoma. And then Jake Smith and Braden Liebrock, Jake Smith from Notre Dame Prep, and then the tight end from Chandler, Braden Liebrock, they're heading to Texas. So I think these two programs recruit Arizona, especially the big-time guys, but haven't gotten many commits to go over there. I'm thinking Connor Brewer, who might have been the last major one for Texas from Arizona. Now they have 3 for this rivalry.
And I know that I call games, you call games, and it's really, it's different for me at least when you go up to a game and you're going, the Oklahoma commit, the Texas commit, and you're naming off these big D1 guys, and it's not always just in 6A. It's sometimes 4A, 5A, 6A, even again to some of the lower ones getting D1 offers, and it's really interesting now having this spread so far around the state.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of go from the in-state to ASU, because there are quite a few guys that have committed, and it seems like that ASU is kind of going off of the potential right now. I think the product that they could give these recruits at the time when Herm Edwards hadn't taken the field yet. This coaching staff was pretty new. It was, let's try to get some guys that are quality football players but maybe a touch under-recruited, get on them early and get some big commitments within the state and kind of get some momentum going. And I think that they've done a nice job with that. Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver from Corona, this is one of those guys, you throw it in the zip code, he's going to come down with it. Connor Soley, he's listed as an athlete. He played running back, wide receiver, linebacker for Saguaro, a big-time contributor. His older brother, Kyle Soley, is with the Sun Devils currently. Anthony Cooper, a trench guy from Millennium, who really led the Tigers to a nice season. Andre Johnson, another wide receiver with a very high ceiling. But when you look at kind of this ASU class, what really jumps out to you for the Sun Devils now that Herm Edwards has had a full recruiting cycle here?
And of course, Herm Edwards knows a thing or two about talent, regardless of what people thought before the hire. He's been around the block. But, something that really kind of surprised me was that with all of the quarterback talk that we've had this year in high school football in Arizona, yeah, they went out and they offered a ton of quarterbacks, but only 3 of them were from Arizona. I was kind of surprised at that, that they wouldn't go out a little bit more locally. Of course, they did get some good ones, but, you had Spencer Rattler in there. You had Gunnar Cruz in there. You had Jacob Conover in there. Of course, none of them picked ASU, but when you look across and you go, that's the only 3 that were offered necessarily. That surprised me a little bit because you know that you need a quarterback looking towards the future. They got good quarterbacks across the nation, but that was the number one thing that kind of stood out at me since we're talking so much about quarterbacks.
Yeah, and it's a strong class for quarterbacks. I think it's just so tricky because a lot of these guys, when you talk to them, it's look, there's only one quarterback on the field.
Yes.
They usually, most teams only take 1 per class. So it's kind of like once they get that early offer, they want to commit, get it out of the way most of the time before their senior season. So that timeline's always really interesting, and I think that's why.
And it's kind of come out of the blue here in Arizona with the quarterbacks. It's been a little bit out of the blue.
Yeah, and Spencer Brash, a guy that committed to Cal, he didn't waste much time. Once he got that Cal offer, took a visit, he liked it, he was in. And I feel like that's kind of what a lot of these guys, especially as they approach their senior year, have been doing. So an interesting timeline for that, certainly. On U of A side, not as much of an in-state influence for this class, at least. I think Coach Sumlin has gone back to a lot of his target areas in Texas. But they have, I think they're kind of playing off potential too as well, focusing a lot on the defense. And I think now that Kevin Sumlin, Coach Mazzoni are kind of getting themselves figured out here in Tucson, they can really start attacking the offense as well.
Absolutely. And looking at the offense, I was scrolling down and looking at some of these offers that Arizona has, and one name jumped out at me that I thought was strange. It makes a lot of sense. Is I was looking at, I watched a few games for Deer Valley this year, team that kind of underperformed in the 4A conference this season. Watched them against Cactus, who had a fairly good year in 4A, and I went, there's one kid on this squad who has just been phenomenal offensively for the Skyhawks, and that was Des Melton. And he had phenomenal speed, he had phenomenal awareness, and he got 5 offers, 3 in-state, NAU, ASU of A, and then Nebraska and Iowa State. And he's not really pinned down on their sheet as a wide receiver, a running back, whatever. He just athlete.
He's a football player.
He's a football player.
He's a football player in a Mack truck.
Yes, and so that kind of caught my eye there, being an Arizona person in there, and there's no real feel yet on him exactly where he's going to go.
And that's one of the interesting things. I believe, if I remember correctly, Arizona was the first to offer him. Obviously a different coaching staff, but had a very productive high school career, a 3-year starter, and made a ton of noise, and definitely, potential coming out of his ears. So definitely one of the many guys to watch. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. On the other side, we have Brandon Huffman of 24/7 Sports. We're going to cover a lot of ground with him. That's coming up next on the Friday Night 360.